And welcome to the opening of this year's Agile Online Summit. I'm Ines Garcia, and with Helen Garcia, over the next 3 days, we are your host for this very summit. We're both passionate Agile practitioners, amongst other things. Right, so we have a packed schedule ahead of us, over 3 hours of content each day, running 4 content tracks in parallel. And the themes for this year are tools, so that we can be equipped and better prepared. Sustainability, so that we can leave the place better than how we found it. And that's product, that's people, and that's planet. Happiness, because life is perishable. So do what you love and love what you do. And the live hands-on sessions. So get ready to roll up your sleeve. Now this year, we're using Slack as the hub for the session, conversations, and connections. If you haven't yet, head over there right now. You have the link in several email comms. Check the channels 1 to 6, that includes all the tracks. And right now, hop over the track tools channel and ask your questions to today's keynote speaker.
Thank you, Ines. So Johanna Rothman is here with us today and going to be sharing her wealth of knowledge on the use of visualization for feedback loops. So if you've ever sort of questioned where the time goes or why as human beings we are so bad at estimating things and the time spent on estimating may just go by the wayside, then you are in the right place. Why? Because we believe in a culture of change. A culture that brings value sooner to our customers and brings learning cycles as part of our day-to-day in our organizations. So Johanna, as you've said before, the faster we can learn, the faster we learn what does not work for whom and what doesn't work for whom. Sorry, what does work for whom, I should say. So Johanna, thank you for joining us here today at the Agile Online Summit 2022. It is wonderful to have you here on board after hearing so many of your talks, reading many of your blogs and books. It's a real pleasure. I'm yet to go through all 19 books, but I'm hoping between Ines and I, maybe one day we'll manage to do that. And Johanna, you are well known for being a pragmatic and frank leader in the Agile world, with a real keen ability to simplify complex issues through visuals. So we are mega excited to be able to hear what you've got to bring to us today. So without further ado then, I welcome to the stage Johanna Rothman. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I am very excited to be here. So let me talk let me address the issue of why we are all here today, because I think that this is all these short feedback loops and visualizing them. That's all about our ability to really use agility in our work. So think back to why you are here. Think back to why your company said, we're going to go Agile. We're going to have at least the teams use an Agile approach. We're going to try and limit work in progress. We're going to learn faster, all that stuff. Why do you think that they did that? Some managers, well-meaning, maybe not so really up on why Agile approaches work, think that they will get twice the work in half the time, 4 times the work in a quarter of the time. All that nonsense, right? Not useful thinking. But that's because they have forgotten why they want to get all that work in less time. That's because we are in the innovation business. We innovate. We change our customers' lives. We change what we do so we can help our customers change their lives. Now, I don't care if your customers are out across the world where you have a product that you share with the world, or your customers are down the hall. We innovate because we need to change our customers' lives Because while our customers may not actually say we want to change our lives, that's the whole point of what we do. Now, I think that we need innovation at all levels of the organization. When we talk about the strategy, which problems we solve for which customers, that needs to be an innovation loop in itself. What about the product and the project portfolio? Which products we develop when, the choices that we make, that's all based on innovation. And every single team has its own product development. So if we are not innovating as a team, how can we possibly innovate for our customers so they can change? And the real question is, why do things take so long? And that's all about the feedback loops. So if you take my supposition that we need innovation in our product development thinking, so we can innovate for our customers, to give them what they need, then, or to learn what they don't need, then it's all about the feedback loops. Now, one of my clients said, well, we'll move from a 12-week to an 8-week plan. We're going to shape the work, just like, is it Basecamp talks about shaping the work? I think it's Basecamp. And they say we can shape the work so it's in roughly 6 to 8 weeks. This particular client said, well, we need to define all the customer problems, right? This all should be in kind of quotes. And that's going to take us a few weeks. Okay, I think that this is a little way too waterfally for me, but maybe that's how they need to work. They're going to rank those customer problems. And it took them a week of wrangling, right? Who needs which kind of work when? That why it took a week, I don't know. They started the work and they have some solutions to some problems that took them a couple of weeks. Notice all this planning is 4 weeks and they're only doing work for a couple of weeks. In order to show their work, they needed a week to plan, to prepare the demo. And then they finally had a demo. But of course, not everything was finished. A lot of things went wrong. So it took them in a full week to demo. So think about this, 8 weeks from idea to demo. And what do you think happened? It was not pretty. So management wanted to interrupt all this planning because when people take 3 weeks to plan, they have new and higher priority work. This is what happens. The longer you take to plan, the more pressure there is on changing the planning. While the team ranked the work, I should say, a HEPO, highest paid person's opinion, often decided after the team ranked the work what he wanted when. And that, of course, changed how they were going to implement. So they had a lot of back and forth. They started the work, but the team could only complete about half the work in these next 2 weeks, which, if you think about it, right, if it takes you through 4 weeks to plan, it's not going to take you 2 weeks to finish the work. And then, because all the work was incomplete, the demo was difficult. I can say that. And the reaction from management was, what have you done for me lately? Which is a terrible reaction for 8 weeks of work. So this team, while they thought they were moving to a more agile plan, really reinstantiated a lot of what they had done with their waterfall approach. Now, another team said, we use 2-week sprints. So they spent 4 hours on backlog refinement. I actually think that this is at least 3 hours too long. They ranked the work in a 4-hour meeting. I think that this is at least 3.5 hours too long. Everyone started their own story, which meant that by the time testing called timeout, we need to finish something, they only had 2 days left in the iteration. That meant they needed an entire day to prep and deliver the demo. So because they had no finished stories until day 8, they really needed to race and finish the stories, which meant they incurred a lot of defects. I would not call this technical debt. They did not consciously choose what not to do. They finished the least amount of work that they could in their remaining time. And the reaction from management was, why do you take so long to finish only half the work? This is not an agile approach, right? Both of these teams are really having trouble with their agility. And let me talk about why things take as long as they do. This is all about Little's Law. Little's Law says the average lead time, which is cycle time, is a combination of the average work you have in progress divided by the average throughput. So the more work you have in progress, the longer it takes to finish it. But that's not what we want in an agile approach. We want short feedback loops of finish a little something, release it in some way. It can be an internal release just for an internal demo that allows you to have more information to either redo this work, which I'm not that excited about, but decide what to do next, right? The shorter the feedback loop, the earlier the learning and the less pressure everybody has. But these two teams had an average cycle time of much, much longer than 1 or 2 days for their little features. And because they had longer feedback loops, all the Little's Law issues were amplified across the organization. The team had longer feedback loops. That meant the backlog planning took longer, and senior leadership could not figure out how to change the strategy for the organization. So our change all gets reduced down to smaller change over a longer time. Now, there's all kinds of dynamics of Little's Law, but let me just talk a little bit about WIP and throughput. So anytime you see an up arrow for WIP and a lower arrow for throughput, means you have increased cycle time. So the longer the team takes to deliver anything, the more pressure everybody has for larger and more extensive product plans. I don't understand this, but I see this all the time. I find that the larger and more extensive the product plans, the more pressure the team feels. That means they start more work, even though they don't finish it. And the more work they have, the more delays they encounter. So it's, again, lower throughput and increased cycle time. The lower the throughput, the longer everything takes, and then everything takes longer. So if you've ever heard of Murphy's Law, whatever can go wrong, it will, at the worst possible time. If you've heard of Hofstadter's Law, everything takes longer than you think, even when you take Hofstadter's Law into account. And then Little's Law explains why. So keep these dynamics in mind as we go through the rest of this. The pressure is overwhelming for people. That's why people start their own stories. And the more pressure we feel, the less we can learn. So think about the last time you actually felt calm and ready to learn something. Hopefully, that's when you logged on to this conference, that you were ready to learn something. But think about your work. When you feel pressure to finish something very specific, are you able to learn? Often not very well. So because innovation requires learning, we might get even some delivery, but we don't get a lot of innovation. We often feel like we do the same thing over and over again, but that's not our business, which is really a problem. So think about what innovation requires. It's all about fast feedback, short experiments, something somebody can see. Hopefully it's a customer, it might be a user. And yes, there's a difference between customers and users, but that someone can offer feedback to a person, a team, and to top leadership. So think about fast feedback loops. That's what we really want. So let me talk about the product building feedback loops. When a project starts, the team creates an initial product backlog. And then as they complete the work, they update the backlog. As they start working, on the backlog, they get to dawn on some stories, then they demo. Then as soon as they release, they can get feedback on specific features and the product as a whole, right? That's the general feedback loop. And those of you who are working in sprints, if you are doing 2-week sprints, you might start with initial product backlog for your very first sprint, but then you continue updating the backlog. I include the product owner, the product leader, whatever that product person is called, as part of the team. So I think that as the team finishes any given item, the team starts working on updating the backlog. So how can you get faster feedback loops? Well, first of all, you start with a shorter backlog, because if you don't need all that stuff to consider, why consider it? Then the smaller the stories, the faster the feedback. And if you can't get small stories, I had a client that said, look, we have 2-week stories. I said, okay, is everybody working on one story? And they said, no. And I said, why not? If you have a 2-week story, why not put every single person on that story? It's the most important thing you could do. What would happen if you all collaborated on that story? And they said, I don't know. So I said, try it. And their 2-week stories turned into 3-day stories. They were still very large stories, but when they collaborated on the story, they reduced the duration of the feedback loop. And that allowed them to release often to get feedback. So this is the team feedback loop. Now, there's a roadmap feedback loop. I really like to think about the initial product strategy as an experiment. So the product people set the product strategy. Who are our ideal customers and users? What problems do we want to solve for them? We have an initial start and a roadmap. And then as the team finishes their work, as soon as they finish something, there's a feedback loop back to the product strategy. And as soon as the team releases, there's a feedback loop back to the strategy and the roadmap, right? So the team feedback loop is on the inside. The product feedback loop is on the outside of that. Now, as soon as the team completes a feature and demos, and even without customer feedback, you can change the product backlog. When the customer offers feedback, you can change the product strategy. So I really like to use rolling wave planning, not big honking roadmaps. I find that the larger the roadmap, really, it's the illusion of certainty. It's not how we get real certainty. Now, I have a roadmap series, which I'm happy to put into the Slack if you're interested in seeing everything I think and know about roadmaps. But let me just talk about the feedback loops here. Now, so I said that the product strategy was, and the initial product strategy is an experiment. This is how management feedback loops go into the product strategy. When management sets the organizational strategy, they say, which products and services do we want? Do we need to implement that strategy? That allows us to select projects to start and continue those products and services. I still really like projects as a container. As soon as you have more products than teams, which a lot of my clients do, you still might need projects to say, we will do this product now, and postpone that project until later, right? That's why I still use the idea of projects, even though I'm fully on board with product and feature-based teams. So I already talked about the internal roadmap strategy, but as soon as a team releases, this green arrow goes back to the product strategy, because this goes back to which products do we want to start and continue, and which products and services do we need to implement. So the team feedback loop is the core of our agility in the organization. The product-based feedback loop will allow us to change what the roadmap is. But as soon as we have finished anything, the first time a team finishes one story, that allows management to readdress the strategy. Now, don't do this if a team is working in sprints. Don't interrupt the team, right? Leave the team alone. Let them finish what they set out to do. That will give you more information, but that's why I really like short sprints. If you're going to do iterations or sprints, don't make them longer than 2 weeks. And if you're doing some kind of really extensive experimentation, don't use sprints at all. Use Kanban and make your WIP very small. WIP is work in progress. I use that term all the time. So really think about how often you can change while not making the team crazy, right? Don't make the team crazy. Allow the team time to breathe, but make shorter commitments with shorter items, and then get feedback faster. Now, you might say, well, I don't know how much I can do, Johanna. And you're right, you don't know what you can do if you've never measured cycle time. So back in any of my project management books, I had this notion of the iteration contents chart, which is, what do we do in any given time frame? This is for iterations. You can use this for a week or two, or even 3 if you need to. So if you're not going to do cycle time measurements, which I will show you a little bit later with value stream maps, you can ask this question. Typically, how much do we finish of which kinds of things on a regular basis? Do we finish features or stories on in a couple of weeks? Do we also introduce changes? What is our typical kind of cycle time? So I find that a lot of teams actually say, in a given month, we can pretty much figure on 3 or 4 stories, several defect fixes, and we always have a change or 2. That's your cycle time. You now know it takes you, you can do 1 feature a week on average. That's fine. That's your cycle time. That's where you start for the back of the napkin cycle time calculation, even if you don't want to do a regular value stream map for several features. Now you can also do a back of the napkin roadmap cycle time calculation. I'm gonna slip in a little interesting here, interesting way to think about roadmaps. I really like a pull-based approach to road mapping. So I say, we know we will commit to all of this stuff before the big black line, because that's our MVP, right? Our minimum viable product. And in a given month, we know we can release at least 1 minimum viable product. Then there's the big black line. We are pretty sure we need to do all this stuff too. However, we will pull from this under the big black line after we have finished the MVP. Now, the interesting thing about this kind of a roadmap, which only one of my clients is trying, I freely admit it, I have not had the progress I have really I expected to see with this kind of a roadmap. So your mileage will definitely vary, but the more you have already planned, the less you can decide to deviate from that plan. But the more innovation you need, the more deviation you need. So this is why I really like to plan less in advance, specify my MVP or my minimum marketable features or whatever it is that's really minimum, but that somebody can use. Then you can commit to pulling more. So think about what you get done on a regular basis and when you can replan your roadmap. That's your roadmap cycle time. Now, I will say product roadmaps are not like car roadmaps. So if you are not using rolling wave backlog planning now, I strongly encourage you to really think about roadmap backlog planning. So instead of we're going to do all of this for the next 9 months, choose your MVPs wisely and decide how little you can do in an MVP. That will allow you more feedback in your MVPs and in your roadmaps. Now, some of you are saying, Johanna, we use story points. We don't use cycle time for durations. And I will tell you, I have stopped using story points altogether. I now recommend against them. Now, the interesting thing is why. So story points are personal to a team. They don't predict duration. Neither can they predict, they also assume they can predict accidental and essential complication. Now, I will give you an example of my walks. I walk every single day, rain or shine. I don't walk in the snow. Yeah, fine. So, and that's, I get my normal exercise aside from my stretching and strengthening. So I take exactly the same walks every day. The fact that I am boring is not the issue here, right? I am happy to be boring for my walks. However, I cannot account for my change in velocity because the neighbor wants to talk to me. Why would people do that on my walk? What if there's road construction? For years, they were pulling up the gas mains and replacing them in my neighborhood. And then they went to the electricity, which is fine. I'm very happy about burying the electrical lines, but they're going to have to do something again, right? And the cable, there's always road construction. I live in the Boston area. We have summer and we have, well, I should say we have winter and we have road construction. Those are our two seasons of the year. So I cannot account for the accidental complication in my walks. I don't always walk at 4 miles an hour, which is kind of a typical walking pace. That would be my story points. Sometimes if it's raining, I walk at kind of 2 miles an hour and I don't even do the whole walk. And when it's snowing and it's icy outside, I don't walk at all. That's 0 miles per hour. So velocity does not take into account delays. It does not take into account regular wall time, as we used to call it back in the original days of software development. Yes, I have earned all my gray hair. But cycle time does account for this. Cycle time is what we used to call wall time, not ideal time. So story points are ideal time. Cycle time is real time. So think about, if you want to get faster feedback, think about how your team works. So I find that teams tend to work in one of three ways. They either collaborate in flow efficiency, where the team really works together. This might be swarming also. They might cooperate as some work together and some work separately. And if they work in totally separately, then they're working in resource efficiency. That's the slowest way to work and the way most managers encourage work, which is really quite disappointing. So let me talk about a collaborative team that only swarms. They're not mobbing, but they're collaborating. These two people pair, and in parallel, Tim develops his tests. That takes them 4 hours. The three of them get together and verify the story. They fix a couple of small nits. Notice there's no wait time below this line. This is a value stream map. So for 4.5 hours, I'm assuming they take a break for lunch. I didn't include lunch here. I always eat lunch. I hope that you folks do too. So, but they have 4.5 hours of really good working together on the story, and they finish it. Now they do have to wait for Peter, the product owner, and then as a team, they review the story. That only takes 15 minutes. And the reason it only takes 15 minutes is because everybody has already understood what goes into the story. And now the item is done. So the cycle time here, which is the work time, is, I should say the work time is 4 3/4 hours. The wait time is half an hour. Total of cycle time is all of that added together, 5.25 hours. That's really, I'm not sure that I would ever count the quarter hour here. I would either say 5 or 6, or maybe I would say 5.5. Or maybe I would just say a day, right? The level of precision on cycle time is almost never, you almost never need that level of precision. Now, some teams say we work together, but we really separate code review. Okay, so person one finishes the story. That only takes a few hours, and then they ask for code review, but nobody is available until the next day. So they review the code. There's no question. It takes them an hour. They leave that code for testing. No one is available until the next day. And then the testing happens. It's really great. No questions. And the product owner is not available until the next day. So the product owner checks and assesses the story. The story is done. What happens here? All this blue work time, 5.3 hours. Again, we don't need to be that precise. But look at the wait time. The wait time is 72 hours. So the cycle time is 77.3 hours, about 3.2 days, most of which is waiting. It's all waiting, right? That's so all the collaboration that you folks did, and when you separate code review and separate testing, it all creates much longer wall time, which is the longer the cycle time, the longer the feedback, right? The feedback loop is longer. Now, if you can't deploy the anything, that increases your wait time. So I won't walk through this value stream map, but if you have to wait for a deployment team to deploy your feature, you're not going to get feedback for the amount of time that deployment team needs. And in this organization, it's 2 weeks. So the wait time is mind-boggling, right? 2+ weeks to finish a relatively short story before you get feedback. That's a long time. Now, when people work as individuals, I'm not going to walk through this because it makes me crazy. Let's just say the blue time is all 10 hours. All this wait time in red, 133 hours of wait time. You could if people work together on this, think about how much faster they could be. So the more you work as experts, the more you work as individuals, the longer your cycle time is. That means you cannot get feedback any faster. So, and if you are not checking your value stream maps for how you work as an Agile team, you are missing out on some very key data. You need this data to not to blame anybody. No, this is information for the team. If your managers really like to blame people, don't share this with them. Just use it in your retrospective as information for the team and then throw it out. Don't publish this. Just use it for you so you can figure out what is really happening in your team. Because if you have to wait 133 hours to finish anything, you will, I don't see how you can be an agile team, right? All the weight of all the WEIGHT, the weight of the waiting, WAITING. It really pulls you back and slows you down. Sorry, I didn't realize I was going to do that when I practiced this. So how does your team work now? Are you collaborative? Are you more cooperative? Or do you work alone? And does the way you work now help you or hurt you in your creativity? Does it help you or hurt you in your innovation? I'm much fonder of much more collaborative teams who work together. Do you always have to mob or ensemble? No, but they will help you. Can you swarm? Yes. Will that help you? Absolutely. Can you pair? Will that help you create more innovative products? Absolutely. So think about how you can work in any way other than alone. And I actually find that the more that we work as teams, the more fun we have. Now, I do need to say, in general, some teams in quotes, have Agilers who make the work not very fun. So here's advice to those managers out there. Isolate those people from the rest of the team, give them something to do, and help them find a new job outside your company. Keep the gelled people together and let them have fun. That's a different talk. Okay. So if you want fast feedback for innovation, which is what I think that we need, and in my experience, that's what we need. Think about how you can start one thing at a time. How can you finish that fast? Not fast badly, fast good, right? With quality. So it satisfies that particular customer or user. And then think about how little you can plan so that you can continue to start one thing and finish it right so you satisfy the user. That will allow you to shorten all the feedback loops. When you shorten the feedback loops inside the team, that allows you to shorten the feedback loops for the roadmap, which allows you to shorten the feedback loops for the strategy, right? But you start with the team and you keep going outside. Kind of think of this as an onion. So if you are wondering what you can do at any level in the organization, start thinking about what if you're a team member, volunteer to work with other people on just one thing. Say, I think we can reduce our WIP, our work in progress, for our team. What if we all paired together on just one or two features? And if everybody says, 1 or 2 features at a time, no, we need to do 3 or 4, then you say, here's what I offer in Create Your Successful Agile Project. Take the number of team members, divide it by 2, and the floor of that number is the number of items you can have in progress, the maximum number of items. So if you have 9 people on your team, I'm not sure why you would have 9, but maybe you do. Divide that by 2, that's 4.5. The floor of that is 4. If you reduce your WIP to 4 items, now people are available to collaborate on just 4 items at a time. And it's okay if you're a tester and you work with a developer. And it's okay if you're a developer and you work with a tester. You don't have to have 2 developers and 2 testers working on one item. You can change everything up. You can experiment. That will allow you to see what you might do to reduce your feedback loops. And the smaller the item, the faster you can experiment. If you are a team facilitator, such as a scrum master, a coach, a manager, help the team pay attention to the WIP. If you only ask this, and if you're using iterations or sprints, I strongly, strongly recommend you ask this question. What will help us get the story done today, right? Don't ask about what everybody is doing separately. That's reinforcing resource efficiency thinking. Instead, what will help us get this story done today? And then if you're a product leader, how little can we do and still get a valuable result that will tell us what to do next? And if you're an organizational leader, and I really hope that there are managers at this conference, monitor your decision cycle time. How long does it take you to make a decision? How do you have to manage your WIP to support reduced organizational WIP? I often find that managers are so overwhelmed by all the decisions they need to make and all the work they need to do that every decision takes so long that the teams and the product people are not getting the feedback they need to create shorter items, smaller items that they can get the feedback fast. So as I said before, this is really an onion. The team feedback, the team cycle time really is the inside of the onion. But you can start anywhere with shortening feedback loops. So I hope that we stay in touch. There's a specific blog post on that this talk is based on, and it's I will have the slides up, and I hope to talk with you in the Slack. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Johanna. Many things resonate with me there, for sure. I particularly like watching out for the hippo in the room rather than the elephant. It's just so, yeah, it's so important, and calling out those things of, you know, what's the least we can actually do, because there's a number of conversations that we go into where it's just like, oh, what can we do? And you're like, let's talk about what we can't do. So thank you so much. It was really, really insightful.
And it just like that, the Agile Online Summit has officially begun. Thank you, Johanna. A few minutes for the next session. So have a stretch and check out which session are you going to be joining next. Hop over to the relevant Slack, of course, for that track. Now you can see the schedule, and if you haven't yet, you can also add the shared calendar with all the sessions for all these days, right? So you have easy where to go when. And for that, you can go to tiny.cc/AOSCAL, right? AOSCAL from calendar. And so let's do this.